You have made it just in time. Your go-to podcast for all things e-commerce logistics.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of our Just in Time podcast. We have another exciting episode coming up today, and I'm very happy to welcome Lena to today's episode. She's here from LIZENZERO, and she will talk to us about the complexities around packaging material and all the requirements and the legal situation around packaging compliance. So welcome to the show, Lena.
Hi, Citra. Thank you very much for having me.
Very glad that you could join. Lena, I gave a super quick insight into who you are, but do you maybe want to explain a little bit more about what you do and why you're an expert on this topic?
Yeah, sure, of course. So, yes, I'm Lena. I'm the head of marketing at LIZENZERO, LIZENZERO's online shop for packaging compliance. And LIZENZERO is one of the leading full-service environmental service providers, and we support our customers in preventing waste, securing raw materials, and significantly improving their sustainability balance in general. So yes, and as I said, with LIZENZERO, we focus on packaging in general. And yes, that's why I'm very happy to talk to you today about all the legal requirements that come with that.
Awesome. And, with legal topics, it's always a bit of a challenge because on the one hand, it's super important to be aware of it. But then I know that our customers are also a bit afraid because of the complexities. So, hopefully today we can explain a bit around how the legal environment is set up today.
Yes.
And basically what e-commerce companies can do to be set up in the best possible way to manage those complexities.
Yes, and I will try to keep it as simple as possible.
Awesome. Cool. Then I would say let's get started with the topic. So maybe just to kick it off, could you explain a bit to the listeners, and especially maybe the ones who don't know exactly all the details around it, what is the legal situation currently around packaging compliance? What do basically European e-commerce companies have to pay attention to?
Yeah, sure. So maybe let me start with EPR. So in Europe, there is the principle of extended producer responsibility. This means basically that distributors of packaging, so all companies that send packaging to private end consumers, must take responsibility for the packaging until the end of its life, including the collection, sorting, and recycling process. And there are legal requirements to ensure the implementation of the EPR. And at European level, there is currently the EU Packaging Directive, which functions more like a guideline. That means that each country implements those guidelines in a different way. So it's kind of confusing for a lot of merchants because there are different obligations, quantity thresholds, labeling requirements, or obligations sometimes to appoint an authorized representative. That's what the current status is. But a new regulation is currently also being planned, which we can maybe talk about later. It's the PPWR, the so-called Packaging and Packaging Waste Regulation. And yes, that will definitely bring some changes into the current status.
Yeah, thanks for the summary. And I can definitely confirm, I think a lot of our customers feel like, especially when they're active in multiple countries, the requirements are different. And I mean, we are coming from Austria, very active in Germany as a company. And just between those two countries, there are already differences. So yeah, it's definitely a bit confusing. But that's why we're here to explain these things. But maybe to take a step back, and that's what we get asked quite a lot from our online shops is, why are there these regulations at all? What's the point? Why basically all of this fuss?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We also get that a lot. Yeah, I mean, most people have heard or even seen that we have a major problem worldwide with waste that is not probably disposed of. And that's why we have legal regulations to reduce packaging waste and ensure that the packaging gets recycled. Yeah, that's pretty much the aim behind this, is to create a better circular economy so that resources are utilized again and again and again, hopefully, and fewer primary resources have to be used, because this saves a lot of greenhouse gases. For example, like, to give you a number, in 2020, more than 4 million tons of secondary raw materials were provided by recycling only in Germany. So yeah, the impact of recycling can get pretty big, and that's why it's so important to make sure that there are regulations so that this whole process can take part.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's a super good point, right? It's actually a nice opportunity if we do it right. So that's why I'm also excited to hear about the regulation you mentioned that's being prepared, because I guess if you manage to kind of align it somehow across countries, it would also be easier to adhere to. But let's get to that later. Maybe one more question around the status quo where we are today. So what would you say are the most important current regulations for merchants in Europe? Are there any specific differences in countries or kind of typical difficulties that you see merchants have today with the setup that we see?
So yeah, that's also a really good question, but also like a really difficult question, because I think for the beginning it's really important again to understand that there are regulations in every EU country right now. And as already mentioned, they are completely different from country to country. So it's not that I can like tell you, okay, you have to do this and that, and then you're good to go in every country. It's really different from country to country. And yeah, as we said before, to find out if you are obliged or not, in addition to the often very complex processes and language barriers, is definitely one of the biggest difficulties for merchants. Can stay tuned. We have a solution for that. But let me first give you some examples for how different it can look in the different countries. So maybe France is a good example, because licensing in France is mandatory from the first kilogram of packaging that you put on the market. So there are no quantity thresholds. In France, there is a labeling obligation. It's the so-called Triman logo, and some like sorting instructions need to be put on all household packaging, so that the end consumers know how to dispose of the packaging correctly. And since 2023, the creation of a strategic plan, it's the so-called prevention plan, to reduce the environmental impact of packaging and paper, is also mandatory and needs to be provided by all distributors. So yes, no quantity threshold in France. You are obliged from the first package that you put on the market. And we also have a labeling obligation and the prevention plan. And maybe to give another example, we can take a quick look at Austria, because it's a little different there. There are also no quantity thresholds, so you're also obliged from the from the first package that you put on the market. But since 2023, and this is a big change for a lot of merchants, it's mandatory to appoint an authorized representative if you do not have a branch in Austria. So you can't really fulfill the obligations on your own if you're not based in Austria. So as you see, the regulations and obligations can be pretty different from country to country. And maybe to sum that up, or to simplify the whole topic of packaging and compliance in the EU, And also as a tool to find out if you are even obliged in your export countries or not, we have created LIZENZERO.EU. You can simply create an account there free of charge and have your obligations for all countries easily checked by completing our obligation check. And then if you are obliged and would like to hand over your obligations, you can simply book our licensing service and we will take care of your to-dos, keep you informed about new regulations, select and communicate with the local recycling systems, report your quantities, etc. So yes, I think that can be a really good thing for a lot of merchants who are super confused with all the regulations and language barriers, etc. Yes.
Yeah. And it's really easy to be confused, right? As you're saying, that the differences are big. And I think what often merchants only realize once they have started shipping with us or on their own is that, it's not really an active decision which countries you ship to, or it can be, but many merchants just open their shop to anybody. So technically, if you're saying, right, there is no threshold, that really means that if you ship just one or a few shipments, you automatically become part of the system, or you're legally required. And I think that's the realization many merchants only make once they actually just start shipping. So for me personally, I think that's the that's already where the challenge starts, because it's not really
definitely
they actively decide I am going to ship to Austria. No, they have a German website, and then somebody from Austria orders, and that brings them into this situation already.
Yes.
Yeah. Cool. No, that's very helpful. I think especially the fact that you're saying, there's different regulations, but you have the option to check these obligations on your website. I think that's a pretty cool opportunity. Maybe now to go through really a bit more in detail the current process for merchants to understand what this entails. So what would like an example of a process for a normal e-commerce company, like a mid-sized e-commerce merchant, look like when we go really step by step? What do you need to do at the beginning of the year, at the end of the year, if you want to comply with these regulations?
So, I have to pick an example for that as well, because, as we talked about a lot now, it's completely different from country to country. But maybe we can look into the details for Germany.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot of our merchants definitely ship to Germany. It's a good example.
Yeah. Okay, good. Then that will be, or I hope it will be helpful. So if you put packaging on the German market, that will end up with end consumers. Also, if you use fulfillment service providers to do so, you have 3 Packaging Act obligations. So you fulfill those to-dos at 2 different points. I think it's important to understand that. On the one hand, with a dual system, and on the other hand, with the control authority in Germany. It's a control authority behind the Packaging Act, and it's the so-called Central Packaging Register. And you can go there and fulfill all your obligations with the register Lucid. But let's go through the 3 steps one at a time. So the first step is you need to complete the licensing. It's also called system participation with a dual system, such as Interzero. You can do that simply via LIZENZERO.de. Don't get confused. We have LIZENZERO.de for Germany, where you can fulfill your obligations yourself. And then we have LIZENZERO.EU, where you can hand over all your obligations in other EU countries and, of course, check your obligations. So first step is the licensing with a dual system. And then the second step is the registration in Lucid from the control authority. Yes, this is also anchored as a duty in the Packaging Act, and it guarantees the control of the compliance with the requirements. And after registration, you will receive your personal EPR Lucid number. That's also a really important number that you need to show if you, want to sell via marketplace or use fulfillment. Then this is like this number that you need. And then the third step is the data reporting, because all the volumes, the packaging volumes that you first reported with a dual system, you then need to put into Lucid. And yes, this is pretty much your third obligation. And yes, once you have done this, the annual process is as follows. So at the end of the year, you report the volumes that you plan to place on the market in the upcoming year. And once that year has passed, you confirm the actual volumes. You can still flexibly adjust the volumes during the year, but it's like this. Yeah, that's how the mechanism works.
Upfront and then reconfirm.
Yeah. Right, correct, yes. Yeah, that's the whole process for Germany.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And as you're saying, actually, also we as a fulfillment company, we ask for the Lucid number.
Yes, correct.
So this is something that we require our customers to provide. And again, often when we have those discussions, merchants only then realize that this is required.
Yeah.
So I can just say it's not really top of mind for many merchants, but it's super important that that they're aware of it.
Definitely, yes.
Cool. No, that's very, very cool insights. Thanks a lot for that. So we've covered a lot about the status quo, right? The differences between countries, how to check the obligations within Europe easily, and also how the process could look in one country or the other. But you mentioned something that is, I think, quite exciting for the whole industry, and that's this PPWR, if I got it right.
Yes.
So could you maybe just explain a bit, what is it, why is it relevant, and what's the status quo of that regulation?
Yeah, sure. So yes, as we talked about before, packaging waste poses a significant environmental problem in the EU. In 2022, to show you some more numbers, the EU generated a total of 84 million tons of packaging waste, which corresponds to an average of 188 kilograms per person. Wow. So that's quite a lot.
It's crazy. Okay. It's more than I would have expected, to be honest.
Yeah, it's really a lot. So and the proposed new packaging and packaging waste regulation of the European Union will bring significant changes once it's finally adopted, aiming to improve the sustainability of packaging, reduce packaging waste, and harmonize regulations across member states. Also, like a really big topic. And the PPWR also aims to strengthen the circular economy, conserve resources, and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The final approval of the definite version, including all specific obligations, because still up to discussion of the PPWR, by the new parliament is planned for autumn 2024, so right around the corner. And the regulations are then set to take effect 18 months after the regulation comes into force. Yes.
Okay, so that's not too far. I mean, 18 months is
but
enough time to prepare, but still it needs to be on the merchants' minds to make sure they are compliant with it. Cool. And what would be the projected timeline for it, for the implementation, basically the key milestones?
So as I said before, a lot is still up to discussion. So we don't really have the full picture right now, but we can definitely talk about some key milestones. The PPWR sets really ambitious goals to ensure that by 2030, all packaging is either reusable or recyclable.
Okay.
And it aims to significantly reduce the environmental footprint of packaging and optimize resource use. And some of the really key components include that all packaging must be designed in such a way that it can be reused or recycled after use. There are also specific requirements for the use of recycled content in plastic packaging. And by 2030, packaging that is not at least 70% recyclable is no longer allowed on the market.
Okay.
And then furthermore, from 2038 on, there are plans to ban packaging that has less than 80% recyclability. So yeah, pretty ambitious goals, I would say. Also, like another milestone that we can talk about is the labeling obligation to simplify the separation and just to make it easier for end consumers. There is a standardized labeling regulation that will also be introduced. Just to make it easier for everyone to know how to dispose of the packaging in the correct way. That are some of the key milestones, I would say, that we know of.
Yeah, for me personally, I find the labeling topic super interesting because I can also really say that that is my biggest challenge as a consumer. And especially as you travel from one country to the other, sometimes it's super clear and sometimes you're like, it's recyclable, but then if you put it in the wrong bin, it's not going to be recycled. So labeling would definitely help me a lot.
Also get that a lot. Yeah, I think it's a really, really important part because
you
do want to do it right.
Exactly, you can increase the recyclability to whatever you want. If the end consumer doesn't get it, then that's another problem. So no, that's really cool. That's also something that's being worked on. And I know you said it's not really clear yet and the details are not out. But what, from your current understanding, what would be the consequences of not adhering to these requirements?
So I would say currently there are already consequences in all EU countries, and the consequences will definitely increase. So it can be like something like just fines, account suspensions if you sell via marketplaces, shipping restrictions, etc., and so on. And also, I think that maybe marketplaces and maybe also fulfillment providers will probably also have to control and check if their merchants comply with all the regulations. This is already the case, for example, in Germany. And so all the control mechanisms definitely will increase. And sellers definitely should comply with the regulation.
Yeah, and as you're saying, in Germany, it's already the case, and for the fulfiller to be checking with the merchant for the documents. And I think it's a good thing because if you really want to make sure that it happens, you need multiple parties to be kind of somehow incentivized to check it, I would say.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. No, very, very cool. And you mentioned something, I think, at the beginning, which was this extended producer responsibility. Could you maybe explain one more time, basically what it is exactly?
Sure. So the extended producer responsibility, short is EPR, stipulates that producers are responsible for their product till the end of its life cycle. That means distributors are not only responsible for the actual product itself, but also for the packaging and product components that they put into circulation. And that, for the entire life cycle, right through the whole recycling process. And this also includes the organization and financing of collecting, sorting, and recycling. And yes, EPR does not only apply to packaging, by the way. It's also differently from country to country again. But to give you like an example, in Germany, what also falls under EPR is electronic devices, so-called WEEE, and batteries. Those two schemes also fall under the EPR. So you also need to make sure that you fulfill, specific obligations there. Maybe just like a quick side note, as I said in my introduction, at InterZero, we not only do packaging, but also other EPR schemes, such as WEEE and batteries. So we also have really easy solutions. If you put batteries and electric devices on the market, you can just check that out at epr.interzero.de and see if we can help you with that, because the requirements and regulations regarding those two EPR schemes are also really complicated, I would say.
Yeah. So basically, it's something slightly different from the packaging regulations that we discussed, but it's very connected. And we also check these topics in the same process, I would say. So as a 3PL, also for us, both the packaging and all the other regulations regarding products and sometimes also product safety and all of that, that also is all falling for us into the same category, I would say. Yeah, that's why we're mentioning it here. Cool. Okay. No, very, very helpful. Even though, as you're saying, it is complex, but I guess for me personally, it's really not about knowing all details of all the regulations as a merchant, but really being aware that these exist and then being able to check on those regulations. Because I think, if you are active in more than one country, selling to consumers in more than one country, it's very, very complicated to adhere to it. But if you know where to check and how to comply then across different countries, I guess that's the best possible solution.
Yeah.
Cool. So we've discussed quite a lot also already about the new regulation coming up. So from your point of view, what should e-commerce merchants do, or basically what can already be done now? Do you have any actionable tips for e-commerce retailers?
Yeah, so if you are shipping to the EU or planning to, you should definitely check where you are already obliged to comply and where you are not. As I said, I mentioned it before, you can do that with us. But ensure that you meet the current packaging laws. And on top of that, I would say, try to stay informed with everything that is coming up regarding PPWR, especially because, there will be a lot of new information regarding that in the next month. It's really an important time for that topic right now.
Yeah, but as you said, something coming in autumn, but then 18 months time. So it's merchants will have time to adjust to it, right? But there will likely be also some work needed from their sides to
definitely. Yeah, for sure.
Cool. So I think we've gone through most of the topics. I think you've provided a really good overview of what's out there and what might be coming. I guess you're in the middle of this industry. So are there any ways for our listeners to stay in touch with you or stay on top of all these developments?
Yeah, for sure. For example, you can follow our LIZENZERO account on LinkedIn and also check out our blog on LIZENZERO.EU. We discuss and address a lot of topics there regarding PPWR and packaging regulations in the EU in general. So you will definitely find a lot of information, and we will keep you informed and up to date there.
Awesome. And you also provide a lot of information for us and our customers. So we also try to reshare that, but you guys definitely have a much better or much more detailed overview. And I assume once the new regulation is out, you will have quite a lot of content around that. So definitely worth listening to.
Yeah, there will be a lot that we can talk about then.
Perfect. So maybe just with a few sentences, how would you summarize this session for the listeners? Is there something that from your point of view would be the number one message to remember from the podcast today?
So I think it's really important to remember that there are already regulations in every EU country, because I think a lot of people don't know that, and it's really important to check those obligations. And then with the PPWR, additional control mechanisms and regulations will come into force. So in general, attention to this issue and the whole topic will definitely increase. So take care of your to-dos, stay up to date, and ensure that you take responsibility for your packaging, and then we can make our environment a little bit cleaner together.
That's a very nice final sentence. Yeah, I mean, ideally, right? That's what it should result in, hopefully.
I mean, that's the
less
whole
waste.
point behind it. But
Yeah, exactly. Cool. No, I think those are really nice words to end the podcast with. So thanks so much, Lena, for all these insights. I know it's super complex and it's tough to kind of summarize it in a simple way, but I think, yeah, ultimately that's the takeaway, right? It is complex, but there are ways to reduce the complexity and kind of be aware of all the changes in the industry. So that was super helpful, I think. Yeah, thanks for everybody for listening in. I hope this was helpful to all of you. And yeah, have a great day and talk to you next time in the next podcast episode. Thanks, Lena. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Just in Time, your go-to podcast for all things e-commerce logistics. Don't forget to share today's episode with your colleagues. Remember, timing is everything. For more information about Byrd's tech-driven e-commerce fulfillment services in Europe, visit getbyrd.com now.